Hi Charles, it's a pleasure to meet you in person and I really mean it. Thank you for your time. So let's start the interview with your freedom of speech side of your personality. Charles, I am one of the most critic on YouTube, if not the most.
And I appreciate that. It's good to have a critic from time to time.
I have even posted savage videos on your Twitter page, but you never banned me. It could be only two reasons for that. Number one, for you, freedom of speech is more than a concept. Number two, you are racing to be the next Dalai Lama.
I believe it's very important if you want to have a healthy ecosystem that you have to have a balance of critics and fans. I mean, the fans support and sustain you when the times are really tough, especially when things get scarce and you have to survive in the winter. But then the critics prevent you from getting too big of a head and remind you you're just a person. You're not a god, and you need to have diversity of opinion to understand the best way of going about things. In fact, some of the best ideas that we've ever had at my company have come from people who've disagreed with me and convinced me to go in a different direction. And I think we need that as an ecosystem. So it's very important to have a nice balance. And I tend to do too many interviews where the interviewer is starstruck or positive. So it's nice to have sometimes more critical interviews. And I appreciate you coming here. Thank you for meeting us in Hong Kong on such short
And it's not because I meet you in person that I will stop.
Okay. I hope so.
If you deserve it, I will do it. If you don't deserve, I will encourage you as much as I can.
And actually, Tone Vase is here. I think we might have an interview with him too.
You know, my phone, my S10 plus one record that is we need. Okay, so my second question. Niels Bohr, one of the founder of the quantum theory, once said, anyone who is not shocked by quantum theory has not understood it. Can we say anyone who is not shocked by Cardano has not understood it?
Yeah, and there was Wolfgang Pauli, was it not even wrong, right, for quantum mechanics. These concepts take some time to understand. You know, Cardano, in a sense, is kind of a response project to lessons learned from Ethereum. You know, with Ethereum, we said, wow, let's add a programming language to a blockchain and let's just see where we go. And what we noticed was that there were a class of 3 different problems that were emergent from these new capabilities. One class of problems was that as you add more users and more things, the system gets slower. So it has a scalability issue. And that's kind of the obvious one. But then what to do about those scalability issues is not obvious because generally you have a trade-off profile that's not so tolerable. For example, if you make the system very performant, you also tend to create a lot of blockchain bloat. So you go from gigabyte-sized blockchains to petabyte to exabyte, and at some point it's either Google or the NSA that has a full copy of your blockchain. You have to pick which one you want. Then the same with the network traffic. If you have 500,000 transactions per second and a kilobyte per transaction, you're like 500 megabytes per second. Who can keep up with that if they're on a normal internet connection? Most people can't. So you end up having this like super node backbone that actually runs the system, but then they end up becoming the kings of the system. They run the system. So it was not obvious with Ethereum if what approach to take and how to deal with those trade-offs so you keep decentralization, but you can scale to millions to billions of users. The other 2 endemic problems that we noticed was the issue of interoperability and the other issue of sustainability. So I am not of the opinion that we're going to see consolidation to a single blockchain and then it's the one chain to rule them all. It's a very primitive viewpoint. The reality is that just like we have many languages and many cultures and many religions, human beings enjoy diversity of opinion. And in some cases, it's a good thing to have diversity. So you're going to have 1,000 or 2,000 different systems, and it's less meaningful about consolidation and it's more meaningful about interoperability. So for example, we have all these different phones, we have Netgear routers, Linksys routers, but they all seem to be able to communicate over Wi-Fi or Bluetooth or these other standards. Not necessarily because of the best protocols, but because that's what the market has decided to give some consensus behind. So interoperability is super important, and it's something that's really not focused on in the Ethereum ecosystem at the moment. And finally, you have sustainability. This is the who pays and who decides component of the ecosystem. So we were a little prescient. In 2015, it wasn't as much of an issue, but then we witnessed Bitcoin Cash and Bitcoin Cash SV and Bitcoin Gold and Bitcoin God and Bitcoin ABC and also Ethereum Classic and so forth. And really, you know, we have a situation where it's not clear how do you fund development, year 5, year 10. For example, we subsidize the Cardano Effect podcast. Well, wouldn't it be better if there was a better model for Philippe and Rick to get funding, or yourself for your show to get some funding from a more neutral source? Because at the end of the day, you have the golden rule. You know, like he who has the gold makes the rules, right? So if I give you money, there's probably some expectation that maybe you say positive things or at least neutral things about me, or at least there's a perception of that, unless there's like a true firewall where you route it through a foundation and then relay it through. So sustainability is super important because if you don't have it, the systems naturally tend towards the centralization or cults of personality out of necessity. You need some glorious leader to unite the tribes and lead everybody over the hill. So we started Cardano in 2015 as just kind of a natural response to these emergent problems, and we launched it like a DARPA project. So we said, let's treat it high risk, high return. So we have aspirations, let's do a lot of very deep research, and then let's try to extract from that research a collection of reasonable protocols. And like any DARPA project, there's a lot of missteps, a lot of false starts, there's a lot of things that you thought maybe would be useful that turned out not to be, and a lot of things that you underemphasized that turned out to be super important. So over the last few years, we've written 40 papers, and 20 of which have gone through peer review, if not more. It's hard to keep track of these things. We're number one in GitHub commits. We've pivoted a few times. For example, we started all Haskell. Then we realized we needed a better client experience, and Haskell was going to be too slow to get us there. So we did Icarus, which turned into Yoroi. And Yoroi's not perfect, but it's certainly a lot better than Daedalus for a lot of users. And it's getting better every iteration. And actually, Ledger support's coming out in the next 2 to 4 weeks. So that investment panned out. So it's an overwhelming project in its totality. But it's been a lot of fun to be involved in it, and it's been a lot of fun to figure out how to solve some challenging problems, especially governance problems. Like the Cardano Foundation's issues, that was very tough, because the independence of the foundation worked against us as an ecosystem.
Yeah, it was sad to witness.
Yeah, and I wasn't in a position where I could fire Michael Parsons, so we just had to wait for his behavior to become so tremendously egregious that we had leverage to actually push him out. So that meant that the whole community had to go on hold for 2 years, and really critical stuff like the help desk and exchange listings I had to do at IOHK. We weren't set up for it. We didn't have the people for it. We had to hire these people, and we did things as best we could. But you know, when you're kind of shitting when you run, you know, you're not necessarily clean. It's not the best situation. So we received a lot of criticism, some fair, some unfair for it. But you know, we were able to have a good outcome there. And actually, I think that's a testament to the strength of our community that we were able to resolve the foundation issue without a Tezos-style event, where it just lingered on, and you had to kind of pay him to leave. Parsons resigned, didn't get any money.